Welcome to the 16th episode of Kabbalistic Mystic, the podcast for the Western Seeker, where we explore the Tree of Life and the ancient Hebrew wisdom as the lost spiritual heritage of the West. I'm your host, Batat. This past week, we celebrated the Equinox, September 21st, the time in which the length of the day is equal to the length of the night, hence equinox. It marks the beginning of fall, which, like spring, is a transitional season. Now, these seasons are a time for us to morph, and fall, just like spring, is a great time to cleanse or even fast. And so in this episode, we'll talk about fasting, not just as a spiritual practice, but also as a tool of physical and emotional transformation. Before we begin, I want to get a few logistics out of the way. First, I want to remind you that Kabbalistic Mystic is now published every 2 weeks, not every week. And second, I would like to thank a listener named Lee Samuel, who wrote the first visible review for Kabbalistic Mystic on iTunes. It takes a lot of work to produce a podcast such as this one, and sometimes a simple review allows me to know that this work is done for a reason. So thank you, Lee, for taking the time to put in a review. Reviews are critical for podcasters. It's really the only way we can grow and continue to do our work, and it helps us get more listeners. Now, for those of you who are interested in writing a review or maybe tried it but are not sure how, the Podcasts app on iPhone is a little funky. And here's the deal. Even if you are subscribed to this podcast, to write a review, you must search for it again using the right icon at the bottom, the search icon. For written instructions and screenshots, go to www.kabbalisticmystic.com/review. All right, time to begin. Journal entry, January 12. It's early morning and I'm wide awake. My conscious mind wants me to get up, but I can't seem to propel myself out of bed. Dark, heavy energy engulfs me. It's been this way for the past few months. It seems that the more I study the Tree of Life, the deeper it takes me to my own inner abyss. The path is narrow, that I knew, but it is darker than I have imagined. All I want is some relief, some joy. But once one has boarded the train of ego dissolution, there is no getting off. Once the cup of inner potential has been sipped from, no other potion would serve as a goal and as a worthy drink. I sigh, and a tear is forming at the corner of my eye. It is going to be another day of misery. I'm okay with the suffering, I really am. The grief that swirls in the belly, the heaviness and sadness that threatens to squash the heart, the fear that fills me in an attempt to quit. But there is no turning back. There's no light without darkness, I know that, and I've signed up for this. The path of the spiritual seeker is seeded with challenges, and the Tree of Life can only serve as a map. When one travels through the darkness of the soul, the tree offers nothing but a vague consolation in the form of a faint reminder. You are going somewhere. You are here for a reason. I cling to comforting thoughts like a tiny lifeguard in the hands of a drowning man as the waves toss me around unmercifully. I'm yet to see an end to the raging storm. No, it's not the suffering that really broke me. It's the lack of meaning. Something was lost. The reason why I'm doing it has dissolved, shattered into 1,000 pieces of murky evidence, no longer making a complete picture. Nothing makes sense anymore. It's been 3 years since my spiritual awakening, and I'm no doubt a transformed man. I've learned to love, to cry, to care for others. I've learned how selfish I was, how self-centered and ego-driven I've been. I've learned how I was controlled by fear of not having enough and allowed the false desire to make money take over my life. I've learned to forgive myself for some unforgivable deeds. Truly, I've been transformed. Why must I suffer further? What is the purpose of this leg of this journey? For the first time, I haven't got a clue. The more I go down this path, the less time I have for the social, the mundane, the trivial. I've lost interest in movies and food and in dinner parties. I no longer drink. I no longer smoke or alter myself in any way. The opposite is true. I keep thinking of fasting for some reason. Fasting, I have no idea why it's on my mind so much. I go back to my study and start looking through the books. I know I picked up a few books about fasting throughout the time I've collected these books. The thought of not eating anything for days is scary to me. I'm no longer obsessed with food like I used to, but I'm definitely still medicating my anxiety with it, no doubt. It's amazing how much we think of food. We eat 3 times a day. We snack in between. We shop for food. We prep it. It's such a huge part of our life, to the point that when we don't eat, for example, on a short cleanse, many find themselves bored, as if they're missing something. A deep, deep knowing in my heart formed into an idea as of late. It is time. Food has been the thread that stitched my physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual journey into a personal story worth telling. It has been my substitute for self-love, the cause to most of my illnesses, a metaphor for my obsession with the love of the feminine. It is my lover, my nemesis, my holy grail. I used to conceal packs of sugar in my pocket on Yom Kippur, consuming them on the bathroom of the synagogue to keep me energized while others were foolish enough, in my mind, to suffer from hunger and thirst. I medicated on bread for years, ignoring the havoc it wreaked on my body. I would overeat in order to satisfy the insatiable need for purpose, to fill an invisible gaping hole in my heart that threatened to reveal itself to me whenever I got hungry. It's time to climb the mountain, conquer the fear, kill the dragon. Those who know me know how much it means when I'm ready to face fasting. The one person who was not willing to fast even for one day, sometimes even for a few hours. But I suddenly have a plan. My inner child is silent, paralyzed with shock and terror. It knows what I'm about to do. It knows it does not have any more power over me, and it cannot resist any further. I've made up my mind. I will go to the Abbey and take my books with me. I will fast with the intention of letting go of my food obsession, with the intention of finding my purpose, and with the intention of cleansing my soul. The sudden clarity of a slowly forming plan is making me feel light again. I may not know the meaning of life, but I know my next step. I feel a surge of energy and hunger floats into my awareness. If you're about to fast, my inner child finally speaks, his tone bitter and frustrated. You better eat shitload of food now, and I want a big, fat pizza. That and a few other journal entries are entries from my own personal journal throughout one of the years of my transformation. Fasting has always been a tool for spiritual advancement. Almost all documented spiritual leaders, when you read their books or when you read about them, you realize they've fasted in some form or another. The Buddha achieved enlightenment after years of experimenting as a Brahmin, depriving himself from the appetites of the body. Eventually, sitting under a tree for a prolonged amount of time, I doubt he had a bag of peanuts in his lap. Jesus is said to have fasted for 40 days in the desert. Gandhi fasted many times, also as a way to protest. In the Bible, in the Book of Kings, the entire city of Nineveh, including animals, fasted upon hearing the pronouncement of judgment from the prophet Jonah. And they did that to be spared from calamity. Pythagoras, Plato were known to fast. The list goes on and on. Now, I mentioned in previous episodes that the first stage of enlightenment is the letter Ayin, which means eye, depicted in tarot by the card the devil. It symbolizes the appetites of the body which we covet with our eyes. The first step in our spiritual journey has to do with recognition of the ego personality traits that make us desire these appetites, and then dissolve them, and by that eliminate the desire altogether. So it's a cyclical process, like a slowly peeled onion, layer after layer. It's not like, oh, one day you have no desire, but rather, if to give example for my own journey, in the beginning, it was my obsession with sugar. So it was time to sort of recognize the piece of my ego personality that made us desire sugar on a regular basis. And in my case, it was also a physical illness, a physical piece, lack of energy. In other words, the process of spiritual evolution happens when we focused on our mental, emotional, and physical transformation. Eating is the most basic appetite, and one that we're trained to satisfy from the moment of birth. Right after we're being birthed, we are given to our mother so she can feed us. And as such, it's often the hardest one to overcome. We need food to live. And so the line between what is required and what is wanted is a very hard one to detect at first. Also, and especially here in the West, food is often used as a replacement for love or as a way to escape anxiety. Just think of a social gathering, like a party full of people who are expected to do some chit-chat, and watch how everybody flocks to the food table. We eat as a distraction. As someone who suffered from food obsession for years without even knowing it most of the time, I'm deeply familiar with the topic. I have this theory that Israelis are essentially an entire nation that is suffering from food obsession. We think of food all the time. We talk about it. We cook. Our life revolves around meals. Yes, it's true everywhere, but especially in Israel, every time I go there. Fasting or cleansing should be done slowly and gradually. When I first started this practice, it was limited to simply avoiding sugar or bread or both for a period of, let's say, 3 weeks, for example, just to see how I felt. And slowly and steadily, as I noticed that I was feeling better, I gathered more and more conviction and determination and tried other cleanses. I basically got convinced that they're actually helping me. And with each one, I noticed some kind of a transformative result. Not just physical, that was sort of in the beginning, but also, eventually at least, mental and emotional. And then over time, a spiritual difference. It was sort of like when I cleanse or when I fast, I have a shift of consciousness of sort. So we must first cleanse the lower vibrations, the physical ones, that is, and then climb up to the emotional and then the mental before we reach the spiritual realm. So if it's your first fast, a good intention would be, the various physical illnesses that you are facing versus to say become spiritually enlightened. Now, I heard somewhere that inside of an Egyptian pyramid, they found an ancient engraving saying that humans live on 1/4 of what they eat, and on the other 3/4 lives their doctor. So it turns out that water-only fasting used to be a natural cure for many illnesses. A man named Upton Sinclair published a book called The Fasting Cure, in which he shared the experiences of over 250 patients who cured various diseases by simply fasting. Nowadays, many nutritionists object this kind of fasting, claiming that it's too harsh of a practice and that it can lead to muscle atrophy and starvation. But I can tell you from experience, this is not necessarily true. And it is the recognition that this type of fasting is very powerful, is slowly coming back. People are starting to recognize that it's indeed the powerful inner physician we are told it is. That saying inside the Egyptian pyramid, I can tell you from experience, is true. Once you start fasting, especially after a long, significant fast, you realize you're eating much, much less. And today I live on less than half of the food I used to eat before I fasted. And it keeps going down. Now, I'm not a physician. And I want to sort of state that very, very clearly. I'll not be recommending you to fast, but I do want to share my personal experience with you in this episode. I have used water-only fasting as a way to cure physical issues, but more importantly, emotional and mental stagnation, specifically my food obsession and a depression of sort that I was stuck in as a part of my transformation. Fasting, to put it in simple words, have transformed my life. Now, if you're interested in learning about the benefits of fasting as reflected through research, through science, simply go to YouTube and search for the term fasting benefits. I am not a scientist, and I will just briefly say that from what I've seen and read, research does show that fasting helps the brain, it helps the blood, the liver, the heart, the muscles, the intestines, you name it. I'm not a big fan of research, that type of research at least, because much of it is done on animals, and because at the end of the day, it is a generalization. Everyone's different. So just because, a group of 20-something people behaved in a particular way under particular conditions doesn't mean that you will. We must apply our own judgment and learn to use our own intuition when it comes to what is good for us. I am, however, interested in presenting some facts related to my own journey and quote the words of many wise men who have practiced this ancient practice of fasting many, many times. Mark Twain, for example, is one of them. A little starvation, he said, can really do more for the average sick man than can the best medicine and best doctors. Here's a poem by Rumi. What hidden sweetness there is in this emptiness of the belly. Man is surely like a lute, no more and no less. For if, for instant, the belly of the lute becomes full, no lament, high or low, will arise from that full lute. If your brain and belly are on fire through fasting, because of the fire, every moment a lament will arise from your breast. Every moment you will burn 1,000 veils by that fire. You will mount 100 steps with zeal and endeavor. Become empty of belly and weep like the reed pipe. Become empty of belly and tell secrets with the reed pen. If your belly is full at the time of concourse, it will bring Satan in place of your reason, an idol in place of the Kaaba. When you keep the fast, good habits gather together before you like slave and servants and reunite. Keep the fast, for that is Solomon's ring. Give not the ring to the devil, destroy not your kingdom. Even if your kingdom has gone from your hand and your army has fled, upon fasting your army will rise up, pennants flying above them. The table arrived from heaven to the tents of the fast by the intervention of the prayers in Jesus, the Son of Mary. In the fast, be expectant of the table of bounty, for the table of bounty is better than the broth of cabbages. Journal entry, Thursday, January 14th. It's 2 a.m. I'm lying in bed, wide awake, refusing to succumb to the realization that I won't be falling asleep anytime soon. I can't get the fasting idea out of my head. I found a monastery in Idaho where I can do it, deep in the woods where I have no distractions or temptations. The sister I spoke with were accommodating and understanding. The only reason I didn't book it was my inner resistance to commit. I know how powerful intention is. Once you set the will in motion in the form of solid action, the universe responds. Once the fast is going to be booked, my body, mind, and spirit will automatically start prepping for it. Jupiter, a 4-month-old kitten, hops on the bed and starts its nightly ceremony of prospecting for the best place to sleep. After what seems to be forever, he finally settles in the crevice of my neck and begins the trance-like knitting phase of his instinctive ritual. I lie in the dark and submit myself to its skillful movements, his claws safely stowed in the soft paws as he vigorously kneads my neck. He finally settles into place, and soon after, his loud purr ceases as an indication that he fell asleep. I, on the other hand, am more awake than before, now further chained to the restless, motionless anguish of my sleep-deprived state. I close my eyes and focus, attempting to detach my awareness from the torrential hail of thoughts that is racing through my mind, circling around one conclusion. I suffer from food obsession. The body is a reflection of our psychospiritual state. First, physical issues are addressed, and then we are left with the aftermath of our emotional nakedness. I'm no longer overeating. After years of adjustments in my diet, I'm now in tune with my body. But specifically because I'm now listening to it, I'm now noticing the constant desire to snack whenever I feel the swirling rise of anxiety and stress. Under the surface, I found a layer of obsessing attachment to food, which was still very much present. All it takes is a trigger, and I find myself in the midst of an outburst of endless food cravings. I'm ready, I think to myself as I lie in bed, the kitten warming one side of my neck. I'm ready to face my dragon. I avoided fasting my entire life, hiding sugar packs in my pockets on Yom Kippur, justifying my cheating with resentment and dismissal of dogma. I failed to recognize the ritualistic piece of it. In truth, I'm afraid to fast. The sensation of hunger brings up a maddening anxiety and a sense of loneliness, demanding me to immediately compensate for my suffering with a juicy, fat burger or a giant pizza. A long water fast might be merely the test of resilience and discipline for others. For me, it's a holy grail, a giant mountain to climb. It's an initiation, a sacred rite of passage, a fiery dragon I must slay to release my inner self from its lifelong captivity and to embody all that it has to offer: unbeatable strength, splendid grace, and fierce and fiery determination. I will never again be broken in the face of loneliness or require external love to fuel my reason to live. I'm ready. For now, I rationalize, I better enjoy myself. I gently push the kitten away onto the pillow, and he emits a displeased, inaudible meow as he wakes up and vigorously shakes his head. I'm going down to the kitchen to grab a bite, I whisper. Wanna come? There are many fast and cleanses out there. I'm not here to recommend one or the other. I instead suggest that you follow your intuition and desire and do the one which speaks to you. I've done many cleanses, most of them focusing on a group of foods, such as elimination of sugar and bread for a particular period of time, or not eating anything other than vegetables for a while. I've done an Ayurvedic cleanse in which you only eat a dish called, it's sort of like a rice dish called, I forgot what it's called, but it has a lot of spices, and that's all you eat for 7 days. That's kind of brutal. But there is one type of fast that I wish to talk about. Not because I recommend it necessarily, it's not for everyone, but because it's simply different than all other cleanses and fasts. And that is the water-only fast. In the late 1800s, a doctor named Edward Hooker Dewey was treating patients from the Civil War. And he noticed something interesting. He noticed that every time a patient could not eat for some reason, either did not have an appetite or had a stomach issue, there was a different set of symptoms that the doctor noticed. And those symptoms were related to purging, to the detoxification. And what he realized after testing it again and again, that after about 3 days of not eating anything, the entire digestive system shuts down. What happened then? The body goes into a special mode, a purification mode, if you will, and detoxes everything that needs to come out, and that is through the skin, through the breath, foul breath, through the armpits, through the tongue. I mean, you name it. Anywhere in the body where we can detox from is then showing signs of the cleanse. And he noticed that after a while, the symptoms, various symptoms of disease, the body sort of goes into a self-healing mode, and the patients got better. And after a while, the appetite suddenly, just like a switch, came back together with very, very specific symptoms indicating that the fast is over. Now, at that point, it's critical to start eating, because if you don't start eating once the appetite is back, then your body goes from the detoxification mode into starvation mode. So it's very, very important to kind of pay attention and realize that at that point you're supposed to start eating again and knowing how to do that. So the reason I want to talk about this fast is because this theory suggests, and it kind of matches information that we have from thousands of years ago where sages have done this, and it's listed in various sacred texts, that when we shut off our digestive system, when we shut it off completely, the body goes into a special mode that is designed to heal us from whatever ails us. Now, the reason I stress that is because there's a lot of fasts out there that are not quite similar. They're similar, but they're not quite the same. Like, for example, the Master Cleanse. It's a very famous cleanse where you only drink, I can't remember exactly what it is. I've never done it, but you only drink a particular type of concentrated juice once a day. I know there's some cleanses where you only drink broth, and so on and so forth. But I want you to take note that what happens when you do that is that you're reactivating the digestive system. And so it's critical, if one is to sort of go into that mode of detoxification and go into that special mode of healing by the body, it is important that you stick to water only. And then your entire digestive system shuts down. And what happens is that after 2 to 3 days, you are no longer hungry. And that lasts until you're ready to break the fast. That could be 7, 10, 20, whatever. You have to just wait until it's done. So if you are interested in a particular fast and there's anything that causes your digestive system to re-engage, I would say short of a few drops of lemon in the water just to make the digestive system sort of purge itself. Anything beyond that, even half a cup of orange juice, is too much. And what it's going to do, if there's any nutritional value in what you're drinking, then your digestive system is going to be re-engaged. And that is not going to be the water-only fast. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And the reason why I'm stressing the water-only fast is because that is the fast I have found to be transformative for me. And I want to mention a few books that, if this sounds interesting to you, you can check out. So Dr. Edward Hooker Dewey, the one I mentioned before, wrote a book called The No Breakfast Plan and Fasting Cure. And that's a book that was written, I think was originally published in 1900, so at the beginning of the 20th century. And he's one of the first modern doctors to use fasting. And you spell his name, Hooker's Hooker, and Dewey, Deweew. And I'll put all these books in the show notes. Another book that I mentioned before, it's called The Fasting Cure by Epton Sinclair. And he, as I said before, lists about 250 counts of people who have fasted, and the amazing, amazing results by doing such a fast, the water-only fast. Also in Dewey's book, there are numerous letters and accounts of people who have successfully healed things, even as paralysis, like really amazing stuff. A woman reporting that her vision was restored, so on and so forth. It's almost as if the body, it's this inner physician. The body knows what to do, and all you got to do is allow it to do it. Another book that I found interesting, a book that sort of summarizes the work done by Dr. Dewey, is called Fasting for Health and Long Life by Edward Currington, PhD. Edward has, I'm sorry, it's not Edward, it's Hereward. I don't know how you pronounce that. It's Hereward. And this book was written, I think, later in the 20th century, and it talks about why we should fast when ill, the importance of the water-only fast, how it helps, what exactly happens there. I'm sure we know a lot more today than this doctor knew, but the concept stays the same. Last but not least, there's a book I love, less because it tells you how to fast, but more because it talks about the philosophy of fasting, and that's the name of the book. It's called The Philosophy of Fasting, and it's by Edward Earl Punnington, and it is extremely well written. It talks more about the spiritual aspect of fasting and how one can find the Creator within throughout fasting, and I really enjoy that book. It's definitely one to keep on your shelf and to refer to every once in a while. It talks about the philosophy of fasting, but it's really more of a book that's commentary about religion, about spirituality, so on and so forth. So highly recommended, The Philosophy of Fasting by Edward Purrington. That's the water-only fast. By the way, Edward Purrington kind of coined a term. He called the water-only fast the conquest fast. It's all about intention. So I've been using that term as well when I spoke to people about it. The conquest fast. Journal entry, Tuesday, January 26th. It takes me a moment or two to realize it was a dream, and a sigh of familiar relief is released from the depth of my lungs. I never had a repeating dream, but I did have repeating themes in my dreams, forever changing to reflect my continuously evolving state of psychospiritual state. She weaves her dreams carefully, my beloved subconscious never fails to bring back a motif that I thought was long depleted of its metaphoric value. Such was the dream she chose for me tonight. I get out of bed quietly, not to wake my wife, yet hastily to ensure I don't forget any details. Slippery one, those elusive dreams. All I have is snippets, which I can sometimes connect into a partial storyline if I write them quickly. I sink into the chair in my study and turn on the light. My eyes cringe in their sockets as if to hide from the sudden harsh brightness. I gotta install that dimmer. I start writing, jotting down everything I can remember. The crowded campground, me needing to pee, the filthy toilets. I note to myself that although the familiar theme was back, this time things were quite different. First, the hundreds of people in the bathroom, forming long lines for each toilet. Most of them were sitting, looking at me as I scrambled to find the cleanest one. Second, the floor, which was a point of aggravation and disquiet in previous dreams, was a non-issue in this one. Only the toilets were dirty, and I do not recall being grossed out by a notion of bare feet stepping on a soiled floor, a dreaded memory from previous such dreams. Third, the water in the toilets. They were murky and muddy as always, but this time had a distinct red color in many of them, as if blood was mixed with the feces. I couldn't get myself to pee in front of these people and stepped out to the woods. A feeling of relief swept over me. As long as I had water to keep my hands and body clean, I'll be okay, I reminded myself before I woke up. The message revealed itself into consciousness as I was writing the dream. Bathrooms and toilets in dreams indicate the need to eliminate toxicity from our lives, let it be physical, emotional, or related to our behavior patterns. She was telling me that the fast would help me clean up, discharging years of accumulated toxin into the bloodstream to eventually be eliminated. I read that during a fast, the body goes into a clean-out mode. All feelings of hunger dissipate, and toxins are broken down and eliminated in every way possible, through the skin, through the tongue, through the lungs, through the nails, and of course, through the bowels. She was telling me to go forward with the fast, and that I'll be okay as long as I keep hydrated so that the toxins are flushed and cleaned in my body so they are removed. All those other people in the dream, they were okay with the filth. They just sat there, conversing or watching me, relaxed and under no urgency to escape the bathroom as soon as possible. They symbolized the opposition I have been facing from my surroundings towards my intent to fast, being content with whatever toxicity is present. She told me to be in nature, to allow nature to do its course. I sit on the chair, pen resting in hand. I'm doing this. The fast is booked. I will be staying with the sisters at a Christian monastery in Idaho. I'll have no distractions, no internet, no food to tempt me. It'll be during a Lent, a period of religious observance in the calendar of many Christian denominations that begin in Ash Wednesday for about 6 weeks, culminating in Easter Sunday. It'll provide me with the right atmosphere for my fast. I smile as I think of the irony. Me, a former atheist Jew, is about to spend 2 weeks in a monastery fasting like Jesus in the desert with the intention of a rebirth, to heal my body once and for all, and to connect with my very own spiritual being that is yearning to emerge. I shut off the light and slowly make my way back to bed in the darkness. As I lie down and try to quiet my mind, I express gratitude for the development of the past few days. The dark cloud has magically lifted. I no longer feel depressed. Instead, a glimmer of renewed hope continuously flickers and lights up my mood. I feel relaxed, calm, as if I've seen death eye to eye and no longer terrified by its cleansing, everlasting companionship. I'm no longer wanting, no longer trying, no longer judging or reaching. My mind is still racing, but in somewhat of a subdued manner, as if the conscious chatter has morphed into a muted soundtrack in the distance. I watch it and listen, unattached, unresponsive, and tranquility washes over me, taking me into her arms, into another reality in which she rules and can whisper the secrets of my soul in my obedient ear. That was the last journal entry I'll be reading for you today, and I did go through that fast. And I want to give you, for those of you who are interested to know what happened, I want to give a little update. That fast was the first water fast I've ever done, has changed my life. It lasted for about 2 weeks. As I said before, these fasts, you must wait until you're hungry again before you eat. So for 2 weeks, I had only water. About after 2 days, the physical hunger went away. The mental hunger, that is distinctly different than the physical hunger. Physical hunger is more categorized by a very physical sensation, sort of like a fire in the belly. Mental hunger always starts with a thought about a particular type of food, and then you just crave that food in your mind. If you think of something else, you're no longer hungry. So that distinction is very important. The physical hunger went away after a couple of days. The mental hunger tormented me in the form of childhood foods that were obviously related to emotional patterns that I had for about 6-7 days, maybe 8, and then went away. It was not an easy fast. It was hard, and especially as the first one, I'm sure, it was harder than others. But it was well worth it. I did do enemas every day, and definitely noticed toxins coming out. I drank a lot of water, which was very important. And after about 9 to 10 days, I started feeling a surge of energy again and feeling a lot better, mental clarity, so on and so forth. The real challenge was to break the fast. You must know how to stop the fast. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to recommend this fast either, just to sort of tell you about my experience. But breaking the fast was the hardest period. For about a period of 2 weeks, I couldn't stop eating. And it was it's sort of like a pendulum has shifted to the other side. And it was quite hard to sort of let go of that obsessive desire to eat and to not eat too much. That was very, very important. You must break the fast with a morsel. But the first thing you eat after the fast, it wasn't bigger than a baby's fist, but it was the best thing I've ever eaten my entire life. So there are all kinds of signs to let you know when it's time to stop. That return of hunger, physical hunger is very important. The tongue is clean, so on and so forth. These books I've mentioned before have a lot more information that I can give you about how to do that. If you are interested in doing it, I can give you a few pieces of advice. First of all, don't. Decide that you don't do it and see how you feel with that. If it really bothers you, then ask yourself why. A water-only fast is very intense, and it's not for everybody. So if it really calls you, I urge you to ask yourself why. What is your intention? Intention is very, very important when it comes to fasting. So decide what your intention is. Read either the books I've mentioned or books about the fast that you're interested in doing, and sort of have a game plan. Know when the fast stops. With a water-only fast, you cannot determine in advance how long it's going to last. And that's tricky to most people because most people have to work, and it's not easy. But it's critical, because if you break the fast too soon, you're breaking in the middle of the body still detoxifying, and that's not healthy. So you can have some significant backlashes is the word I'm looking for. So just prep for that. I chose to do it away from people because people will sometimes freak out if you're going to be fasting and not eating anything. My wife, for example, was afraid that I'm going to, my muscles will dissolve and have atrophy, but it wasn't the case. So I just prefer to do it away from people so that I can have my own peace and quiet, and maybe you are the same. So I also urge you to consult a doctor before your fast, especially if you suffer from heart problems or low blood pressure, especially with the water-only fast, because being done for a prolonged amount of time, it's a very taxing experience and can be dangerous in some extreme cases, or when it's just not right for you. So read about it, educate yourself before launching into a fast. But start with a cleanse. Start with a change to your diet. Start with intention. Start by thinking about it, by contemplating it. Don't take it lightly, and it will reward you greatly. There is no avoiding the topic of fasting throughout our spiritual journey. It is a piece of the puzzle, but don't look at it as a mountain you must climb. That's how I did before I did it for the first time, but it's different now. It's a superpower. Once you don't eat for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you can achieve anything. And fasting gets you, it's sort of like propels you on your spiritual journey in a way that nothing else can. So it is a secret weapon. It is a powerful tool of transformation. And treat it appropriately, and it will reward you greatly. Thank you for listening to this episode. We heard music by Bramji. To find a list of the books and other resources I mentioned, check out the show notes in the episode description or on Kabbalisticmystic.com. I thank you again for listening. I'm your host, Batat from Spokane, Washington, wishing you health and love in every moment.